Keynote address given by Sundari Ravindran, and Sundari is a professor of Achyutamenan Center for Health Science Studies, Sri Chitra Thirumal Institute for Medical Sciences and Technology. So she has been giving technical support to international organizations and countries on issues of gender and reproductive health. She was the founder and secretary of the Board of Rural Women's Social Education Center, Tamil Nadu, India. So it was founded in 1981. It is a grassroots level women's organization working on women's well-being through women's empowerment. She is also an advisor to several international organizations and published several articles in scientific journals and books, monographs, etc. And recently her work has focused on ensuring that universal health coverage movement ensures better health for women. So over to Sundari.
Good morning. Let me start right away. Although this session has been entitled The Role of Community in Universal Healthcare, you will see that my presentation is titled Making Health Systems Work for Women. There are a number of other presenters in this session who will be both talking about communities in general and also addressing women's role in universal healthcare, mainly in the role of, how their knowledge or empowerment and leadership contributes to improving health outcomes and behavior. So this presentation is going to be somewhat a complementing those things and trying to step back and say, we've been talking about health systems strengthening for universal healthcare. So how do you ensure that these strengthening attempts do not leave women behind? Now, immediate question, why focus on women? There are many vulnerable groups and so on. So I'm just giving you 3 pieces of information. The NSSO 68th round gives you some, there is overall some marginal difference and between women and men. But if you take the 15 to 45 age group, then there is a big difference in the untreated morbidity between women and men. There are also studies from other places which are smaller scale. The long and short of it, it seems like women are more disadvantaged than men in having access to healthcare, and if we don't pay attention to them, we will not be able to achieve universal healthcare. I am going to focus on 2 different aspects in universal healthcare. One, which we've been talking about, is universal coverage, which is actually about financial protection for an increasing population, for covering a larger benefits package, and therefore bringing down out-of-pocket expenditure. And my thesis here is that women, especially those from vulnerable populations, are more likely to be excluded in terms of population coverage. All of you will remember the 3 dimensions that have been shown up several times. Then in the package of the benefits package, which is always debatable, certain routine healthcare needs of women often do not find a place. And as a result of both the above, women are at greater risk of having unmet need for healthcare and are less likely to receive adequate financial protection. Now, let me come to increasing the extent of population coverage. My task has been made much easier because yesterday you were presented with ways in which population coverage happens, and the mandatory and voluntary prepayment schemes, which are milestones in the pathway towards universal healthcare and for reducing the out-of-pocket expenditure as a proportion of total health expenditure. Now, I'm going to present to you things that you probably already know, but it seems important to reiterate that mandatory prepayment schemes like social insurance, which was pointed out, they exclude those who are in the informal sector and those who are not in the paid labor force. And we do know for India that women predominate. So if you take as proportion among women, a good number is going to be in these 2. Then in voluntary prepayment schemes, like microinsurance schemes, which have been talked about very widely, if these are to be self-sustaining, it may not be accessible to women who do not have access to cash income or unable to expend the cash they earn. Social protection schemes are only focusing on women from below poverty line, but it's not only women from poor households who may face financial barriers. I'm going to give you some figures for this. And some essential services are not made available to all women, so there is no coverage. For example, contraceptive and abortion services for unmarried women, or you've seen a poster which is that the most vulnerable tribal groups being not given contraceptive services because their fertility levels are really low. You will see here, this is NFHS 3 data, that irrespective of age, urban, rural, education, and wealth index, a good proportion of women do not have access to expendable cash or do not have control over how they spend their earnings. Same tallied another way. So, okay, this proportion is not here. So these do not have control over their income, and this is quite a big number, both in terms of wealth quintile, those who are employed and those who are educated. So that is to substantiate that argument. Now let me go on to increasing the extent of health care coverage. What goes into your benefits package? So in many settings, universal coverage is for a range of services which could be quite limited, which means entailing out, other services, top-up services entail out-of-pocket expenses. Now, the choice of services to be included in an essential services package is often based on economic criteria, the DALY's calculation, and one review of more than 100 essential services packages based on the DALY's calculation showed that actually it had family planning, antenatal care and immunization, but not emergency obstetric care. So only 1/5 had emergency obstetric care, screening for breast and cervical cancer and so on. The remaining 4/5 did not even include emergency obstetric care. They had routine antenatal. Now, prepayment mechanisms is an area that I would like to dwell a little bit more on. Those prepayment mechanisms that are not large enough will find it unviable to cover many routine SRH services. Take insurance, for example. Now, insurance is meant for non-random, high probability events. And many sexual and reproductive health needs, especially reproductive health needs, like contraception and pregnancy, are neither random nor low probability. And therefore, most private insurance do not include these unless the premium levels are set really high. Now, if you want to have a micro-insurance scheme, then actually studies from Africa show that many of them have excluded some of these things, because unless you're going to subsidize it hugely in order to make these things available. Now, what do we do in our own country? The RSBY, which is meant for low-income people, this leaves a choice of conditions to be covered to the household gender dynamics. So there is a ceiling, and within which you can choose who to treat and what condition to treat. And in places where the gender dynamics is okay for women, there may not be a differential, and in other places where they may need this most, they will not get it. There are already various studies that are showing that. And coverage of drugs within what is covered in the benefits package will become very important from women's point of view because of higher prevalence of many NCDs and longer survival of women than men. So for both these reasons, that is limited population coverage, again, one point aside, the population coverage, various RSBY presentations here did indicate that where there was a 5-member ceiling, women tended to get left out more, or particular subgroups of women tended, like older women in Kerala, tended to get left out among those who were covered. So this would mean a higher out-of-pocket expenditure for women, and social protection measures, including those specifically aimed at women, have also not provided adequate financial risk protection. Studies in India and Nepal have shown that JSY and other pregnancy protection schemes give you way less money than what it actually costs the household. So it is not really a means of financial protection. And private insurance schemes, gender ratings in private insurance schemes are have been fought against in the United States. I am not aware of to what extent the premiums are set differentially for women and men in India. If anybody knows, I would be happy to learn from you. So I've first talked about the universal coverage. Now I want to say, even if you took care of all these, will there be universal access? There is going to be a problem. There are huge supply side problems and there are huge demand side barriers. Now on the supply side, there is limited availability of service delivery points at all, and of many services that are routinely needed by women except at tertiary care centers. There are posters here illustrating availability of MTP services, for example, and even emergency obstetric care. Even now, when services are available, limited access because of inappropriate service delivery modes, inappropriate location and timing of services. One or two examples for when those working on tuberculosis would know that active case finding studies are repeatedly showing that more women are detected in, and more elderly are detected in active case finding than in passive case finding. So if you have an inappropriate mode of service delivery, you're likely to miss out women. There is also studies on cataract. China, where they have taken the cataract screening to the community level, found that they were able to pick up way more women for cataract surgery, and the differentials between male and female cataract surgery prevalence came down dramatically. It's a published study. Fragmentation of services, going for immunization on one day, for family planning on another day, is going to limit women's ability to go. Non-availability of female providers and gatekeeping by providers for several sexual and reproductive health services. If it's an unmarried woman who goes for contraception, several women who go for abortion, there is gatekeeping by providers, even those who are able to and are trained to provide these. And poor perceived quality of care. I'm using the term perceived, but I should say that there are many instances you're providing pregnancy care, and you have to do a pelvic examination, but there is no toilet and the women have to empty their bladders, and come. How would, you have to take all kinds of risks, to be able to put up with this kind of lack of dignity. A study from Gujarat actually showed that the labor rooms were downstairs, had half windows and half curtains, and, at ground floor level. And so, there was no concept of the women needing any sense of privacy. So although we call it perceived poor quality of care, to me, it is a very real perception. And provider behaviors and attitudes, much has been written about this, of abusive behavior, and the reasons behind those abusive behaviors could themselves be abuse faced by the service providers at lower levels, and so on. But nevertheless, these are barriers. And finally, the household plays a major role in ensuring timely access to services. 47% of women reported having one or more problems in accessing health care for a number of reasons, which did not it was not payment, but getting money out of the household and being able to go alone. For example, only 48% of women, this is NFHS for India, were allowed to go alone to the health facility. So what is to be done? One is factor in that, there is something called gender differentials in the society, and don't be totally gender blind when you're talking about universal health care reforms. And I would say, what is the role of the community? Households and communities are important gatekeepers. Secondly, community monitoring initiatives, the extent to which they have factored in gender issues, is also something that I would like to learn about. If they have, I'd be happy to know more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sundari. Excellent presentation.